The air on Freehold Station was always thick. It was a mix of recycled oxygen, the sharp scent of ozone from passing hovercarts, and the warm, greasy smell of food from a dozen different worlds. Jay preferred it to the sterile, filtered air of the more expensive levels. Here, on the lower merchant deck, things were real. Things broke, and broken things needed fixing. Her hands were deep inside the guts of a Thrixian graph conveyor. Its anti-gravity plates were misaligned, causing it to list to the left and whine like a hurt animal. Next to her, her older brother Min was talking fast and smiling at a nervous-looking Thrixian merchant. Min was good with people. Jay was good with machines. It was how they survived. "The regulator is fried," Jay said, not looking up. "You ran it with a damp power cell." Again. Her voice was flat, factual. The Thrixian fluttered its feathery antennae. "A simple repair, yes? Not costly." Min clapped a friendly hand on the being's carapace. "My sister is the best. It will be fair. It will also hold." He shot Jay a look. She gave a tiny nod. She could salvage a regulator from the old unit in the back. It would take her an hour. The Thrixian sagged with relief and agreed to the price. As Min finalized the deal, a shadow fell over Jay's workbench. It was long and wide, blocking the flickering yellow light from above. Jay wiped her hands on a cloth, her movements slow and deliberate. She looked up. The customer was a Stellan. She knew it from the armor. It was heavy battle plate, a deep cobalt blue, now scuffed and dull with dust. It was the color of authority, of an empire that spanned systems. The soldier stood perfectly still, a statue of war in the chaotic market. His face was hidden behind a smooth, opaque helmet. The only sound from him was a low, almost inaudible hum from his armor's power core. He was big, even for a Stellan, and his armor was damaged. A terrible, scorched gash ran from his right shoulder down across the chest plate. It looked like energy weapon fire. Near the gash, the servo mechanism at the right elbow joint was dead. The arm hung slightly limp at his side. The soldier didn't speak. He simply reached out a gauntlet hand and placed a single, heavy credit chip on Jay's bench. It was a high-denomination chip, enough to buy 5 graph conveyors. The metallic clink was loud in the sudden quiet around their stall. Jay looked at the chip, then back at the armor. She did not touch the money. "What do you need?" she asked. Her voice still calm, a modulated, deep voice came from the helmet. "The seal is breached. The joint is dead. Can it be sealed? Truly sealed? Not a patch." He needed it to hold in a vacuum. He needed it to hold in battle. Jay understood. She stepped closer, her eyes tracing the damage. The armor's self-repair nanopaste had tried to close the gash, but the wound was too big. The edges were fused and bubbled. She would have to cut the bad material away, heat weld a new composite plate, and reseal it. The servo was a bigger problem. It was a proprietary Stellan military unit. She would have to bypass it or rebuild it from scratch. "The plate I can seal," she said finally. "The servo, I can make the arm functional. It will not be the same. It will be strong. It will obey." The helmet stared down at her. She felt examined like a tool being assessed. "How long?" 3 days. Maybe 2 if parts are here." The soldier was silent for a long moment. He was weighing her words, her confidence. He gave a single, sharp nod of his helmet. "Do it." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd without another word. The credit chip remained on the bench. Min slid over, his easy smile gone. "Jay, Stellan military. That is trouble wearing boots." "It is a job," Jay said, picking up the chip. It was cold. He paid up front. That's not a good sign. That means he doesn't expect to argue. Or he expects it to fail. Min ran a hand through his hair. If his repair fails in a fight, he does not come back to complain. His friends come. With guns. Jay placed the chip in their locked box. She looked at the empty space where the soldier had stood. "It will not fail." She pulled the damaged servo housing apart first. The internal micro-actuators were cracked. She had nothing in her stock that small or precise. But she had copper wire, piezoelectric crystals from a broken comms unit, and ceramic from a discarded food heater. She began to sketch a bypass circuit on her tablet, her mind working through the problem. It would be crude. It would be strong. It would be entirely human in its messy, effective design. As she worked, the noises of the market came back. The calls of merchants, the rumble of carts. But in her mind, she was already inside the armor, following the trauma of the blast. She saw where the heat had pooled, where the circuits had fried. She was not just fixing a machine. She was healing a story of violence. It was a story she understood all too well. Her hands, stained with oil and grit, moved with a certainty that came from a lifetime of making broken things work again. On a station full of flashy tech and alien wonders, her skill was quiet. But it was deep. It was the skill of necessity. And for the next 2 days, the silent Stellan soldier's armor would be her only focus. The Stellan inspection cruiser left Freehold Station 2 days later. The heavy silence on the lower decks lifted, replaced by the normal sounds of trade and argument. But something had changed. Tarek came to say goodbye. He was being redeployed. He stood at Jay's stall in his civilian clothes, a small pack at his feet. "The debt is clear," he said to her and Min. "You have no obligation." "You have none either," Jay replied. She felt a strange emptiness. He had been a storm in her life, unpredictable and frightening. But he had also been fair. He did not offer thanks. It would have been too small a word for what had passed between them. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. It was a seed about the size of a marble. It had a hard, glossy shell that seemed to hold a soft, blue light within. "This is from my homeworld," he said, placing it in Jay's palm. It was warm. "It is a resilience seed. It grows in stone. It finds cracks and makes them into anchors. Its roots are strong. It needs little light." He looked at her, his stern face serious. "Your people do not just fix broken machines. You fix broken moments, broken spirits. You rebuild. Do not hide that mark. It is not a scar of shame. It is a badge of a force the galaxy does not yet understand. They see the crack. They do not see the strength of the repair." He gave a final nod to Min, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the stream of beings heading for the transport docks. Jay never saw him again. Weeks passed. The rhythm of work returned. But Jay no longer pushed her sleeves down to her wrists. The Earthborn sigil was visible as she worked. At first, some customers looked at it strangely. Some even left without buying. But others stayed. They asked about the repair on the Stellan armor, and the story, in bits and pieces, spread. A young, nervous-looking alien trader, a Galath, came to her stall one day. He held a fractured data tablet, its screen dark. "They say you can fix anything," he said, his voice timid. "I can try," Jay said as she worked. He saw the mark. He stared, then pointed a delicate finger. "That is the Earth symbol? From the calamity?" "It is," Jay said, not looking up from the tablet's circuitry. My grand creator's stories speak of that," the Galath said slowly. "He said when the great dust storms hit our colony, it was the Earthborn engineers who kept the dome generators running. They used parts from the kitchens. They saved many." Jay had not heard this story. She paused her work. "I did not know that." "It is a good story," the Galath said softly. "It is a story of not giving up." Jay finished the repair. When she handed back the tablet, the Galath paid her, then hesitated. "May I?" he asked, pointing to her wrist. Jay was confused for a moment. Then she understood. She nodded. The Galath gently touched the mark with the tip of his finger, a gesture of respect. Then he left, his tablet glowing brightly in his hands. The story grew. Humans from other sections of the station began to visit, not just for repairs, but to talk, to share their own fragments of history. Sumin's soup stall became a meeting place, filled with the low murmur of shared survival. One afternoon, Jay took the resilience seed Tarek had given her. She found a small, empty container filled with loose bits of old metal and ceramic shards, the waste from her repairs. She pushed the seed into the center of the jagged scrap and poured a little water over it. She did not check it every day. But one morning, a tiny shoot of brilliant blue-green had pushed up through a ring of twisted copper wire. It was alive. It was growing in the trash, making it into a home. Min watched their stall change. They still fixed graph conveyors and power units. But now, people also came for advice, for the quiet certainty that Jay carried. She no longer just sold repairs. She offered the idea that broken was not the end. The final scene was a small one. A human girl, maybe 10 years old, new to the station and thin from a long journey, stood before Jay's bench. She held a broken music box, a simple thing of tarnished metal. "Can you fix it?" the girl whispered. "It was my mother's." Jay took the box. She opened it, saw the tiny, snapped spring inside. A simple fix. As she worked with fine tools, the girl's eyes wandered to Jay's wrist. "What's that?" the girl asked. Jay finished reattaching the spring. She closed the box and wound it. A faint, tinkling melody began to play. The girl's eyes filled with wonder. Jay held out her arm, showing the mark. "This," Jay said, her voice gentle, "means we are from Earth. It means that when things break, we learn how to put them back together. Even when it's hard." She took a small, thin metal plate from her scrap bin. With a sharp engraving tool, she quickly etched a simple, clean outline of the Earthborn sigil onto it. She handed the plate and the music box to the girl. "So you remember?" Jay said. The girl held the singing box and the metal sigil to her chest, a smile breaking through her shyness. She nodded and ran back to her family. Jay turned back to her workbench. The blue-green plant glowed softly among the scrap. The station hummed around her. She picked up her tools, ready for the next broken thing. The victory was not in battle or in glory. It was in the repair. It was in the seed growing in the junk. It was in a melody brought back to life. It was in a mark, once hidden, now a quiet promise of resilience passed from one hand to another. Humanity's fight was not to conquer the stars, but to stubbornly, quietly, mend their small piece of it. And that, in its own way, was formidable. Jay expected trouble. She expected the Stellan soldier to return with station enforcers, or with other soldiers, to demand the return of his credit chip and report the undocumented calamity survivor. She slept fitfully in the small bunk behind their stall, her tools packed into a ready bag just in case. Min kept watch, his face grim. But the next morning, business continued as usual. Sumin brought them bowls of spicy soup for breakfast, her wise eyes missing nothing. "The big one saw, didn't he?" she said softly. Jay just nodded, stirring her soup. "He did not sound the alarm," Sumin observed. "Sometimes a still pond is deep. Be careful." The soldier returned in the late afternoon. Jay saw him coming. Her body tensed. But he was not in his armor. He wore simple, dark gray civilian clothes, which somehow made him look more imposing, not less. His face was stern, lined, and his hair was cut short. He looked tired. He stopped at the stall and looked at the armor, now fully assembled and standing upright on the repair frame. The gray patch was visible, a stark contrast to the blue. The arm was reattached. "It is ready," Jay said. Her voice was neutral. He walked around the armor, inspecting the repair. He ran a finger over the sealed gash. It was smooth and solid. He flexed the right arm, listening to the faint new hum of the makeshift servo. It was a deeper sound than before. He made a fist, then opened it slowly. "It is strong," he said. He turned to her. "How did you learn to mend Stellan battleplate with?" He glanced at her bench, at the odd collection of parts. "With scrap." This was not an accusation. It sounded like genuine curiosity. Jay hesitated. Min stepped forward, a friendly but guarded smile on his face. "My sister is very gifted. Self-taught." The soldier, Tarek, looked only at Jay. He waited. Jay let out a slow breath. "You know what the mark means. You know the world it comes from. On post-calamity Earth, everything was broken. Everything was scrap. If you could not make a broken thing work with what you could find, you did not eat. You did not breathe." She picked up a small multi-tool from her bench, its handle worn smooth. We were not mechanics. We were scavengers. We kept the air filters running with wire and hope. We kept the water recyclers going with ceramic shards and prayers. My parents, that is what they did. That is what they taught us. She was not telling him everything. Not about the darkness in the lower arcology levels, the failures that claimed whole sectors, the desperate fights over a working power cell. She gave him the simple, brutal truth of the skill. Tarek listened. He did not interrupt. When she finished, he looked at the armor again. This repair, he said, pointing to the gray plate. It will outlast the original. It is ugly, but it is stronger. You used a lower-grade composite because you understand force distribution. You gave up beauty for survival. Jay nodded, surprised he saw it. It is a different way of thinking, Tarek said. He leaned against a support beam, his arms crossed. In the Stellan military, we are given the perfect tool. When it breaks, we are given a perfect replacement. We are taught to discard the broken. To replace, not to repair. And the gash in your armor? Jay asked quietly. Where did that come from? A shadow passed over his face. A border skirmish. A place called Seer V. A moon with nothing of value except a reading on a scanner. We fought another faction for 3 days over a patch of frozen rock. They are dead. Some of my squad are dead. The rock is now ours. It is empty. He spoke plainly, but the weariness in his voice was heavy. My armor was damaged by a lucky shot from a soldier who died moments later. For nothing. Silence hung between them. Min watched, his suspicion softening slightly. Sumin listened from her stall, pretending not to. You fix things to survive, Tarek said, looking at Jay. We break things for orders. For empire. He said the last word without pride. It was just a fact. Jay did not know what to say to that. She pointed to the armor. It is ready. You can test it fully. If it does not meet standard, I will return your credit. Tarek pushed himself off the beam. I do not doubt the repair. He walked to the armor and placed his hand on the shoulder plate. You asked for no extra payment for the difficulty. You did not complain about the parts. It was the job. Jay said that he looked at her. Then at Min, at their small, cluttered, but orderly stall. He saw a resilience that was not about strength, but about stubbornness. A will to keep going, to make things work against all odds. The galaxy sees your mark and thinks, refugee. They think weakness from a broken world, he said, his voice low. They are wrong. They see the crack, not the repair. He tapped his chest, where the gray patch sat over his heart. I will remember that. He activated the armor. It opened with a hiss. He stepped into it and the plates sealed around him. He moved, testing the arm, throwing a few slow, powerful punches in the air. The new servo whirred solidly. Good. His modulated voice came. He looked at Jay one last time, his helmet hiding his expression. Then he turned and walked away, the sound of his footsteps heavier, more certain than before. Jay watched him go, a knot of confused emotion in her chest. It was not gratitude she felt from him. It was respect. It was a thing she had almost forgotten could be directed at someone like her. Min came to stand beside her. Well, he said, that was not what I expected. No, Jay agreed. She looked down at her wrist, covered by her sleeve. For the first time in a long time, the mark did not feel like just a brand of past pain. It felt like a truth. A hard, ugly, but strong truth. She picked up her tools and turned back to the waiting graph conveyor. There was still work to do. A week passed. The rhythm of the lower deck returned to normal. The Stellan soldier, Tarek, did not return. Jay found herself glancing toward the main thoroughfare sometimes, but she pushed the habit away. That chapter was closed. He had his armor. She had her credit. The balance was settled. Then, one evening as she was closing the stall's shutters, he was there again. He was in civilian clothes, his face looking even more tired under the harsh station lights. He held something small and dark in his hand. Mechanic, he said. His voice was quiet. Jay finished locking the shutter and turned. Min was inside, counting the day's earnings. She was alone with the soldier. She nodded, a simple acknowledgement that he held out his hand. On his palm lay a datasphere. It was old, its surface scratched and dull. A thin crack ran along one side. This is not a military item. It is personal. It is damaged. Jay did not take it. She looked from the sphere to his face. His eyes held a tension she had not seen before. It was not the stern focus of a soldier. It was something raw. "I do not repair personal devices," she said, though it was not entirely true. "It contains the last logs from my sister," Tarek said. The words fell into the space between them, heavy and simple. Her scout ship was lost in the Gyre Nebula. "No podias recovered. No reki. Only the sphere was delivered to me after the search ended. It is all that is left." Jay looked at the sphere. The crack was bad. It likely meant corrupted data. It was a fragile, precious thing. "The reader for this model is obsolete," Tarek continued. "Stellan archives do not keep such technology. It is discarded." He said the word with a new bitterness. "I was told the data is likely unrecoverable." He looked at Jay, his gaze steady. "Your people," he said, "are said to have kept old things alive, out of necessity. You understand how to make the lost function again." Jay understood now. This was not a test or a casual request. This was the heart of the man who lived inside the armor. This was his own deep crack. He was not coming to her as a Stellan to a refugee. He was coming as one grieving person to another who understood how to repair what was broken. She felt Min's presence behind her. He had heard. He stood in the stall doorway, his expression cautious. "Jay," Min said softly. It was a warning. She knew the risk. This was more intimate than armor. If she failed, the loss would be personal. If she succeeded, she would be entangled in a Stellan soldier's private life. Both were dangerous. But she saw the look in Tarek's eyes. It was the same look she had seen in the arcologies, when someone clutched a broken picture frame, the last image of a lost family. It was the look of clinging to a ghost. Slowly, she reached out and took the sphere. It was cool and light. "I cannot promise anything. The crack, the data may be gone." "I know," he said. A flicker of relief crossed his face. She had not refused. That night, she and Min worked in the back room. They emptied a storage crate to use as a workbench. Min was quiet for a long time. "This is a different kind of trouble, Jay," he finally said. "I know," she said, examining the sphere under a magnifier. "But he paid for the armor. He did not report us. That does not make him a friend. It makes him unpredictable." "He is sad, Min," Jay said, her voice low. "He has a ghost like we do." Min fell silent. He knew which ghost she meant. Their parents lost when the final arcology sector sealed shut. They had no datasphere. They had only memories, fading like old photographs. Jay did not have the proper tools, so she used what she had. She used a fine laser from a jewelry welder to gently seal the physical crack in the sphere's casing. She built a power relay from salvaged parts to give it a gentle, steady current, hoping to revive the dormant core. The reader was the real problem. They did not have one, so they had to make one. Min found an old public terminal screen, cracked but with a working display grid. Jay scavenged a sound emitter from a child's toy. For 3 days, they worked in secret during slow hours. Jay wired, Min programmed, using old Earth coding tricks to try and speak to the sphere's ancient language. It was a messy, fragile creation of tape, hope, and borrowed parts. It looked nothing like a Stellan device. It looked like something from the ashes of Earth. On the 4th day, they were ready. Jay sent a simple message to Tarek's station ident. A code he had given her. He came after the main crowds had gone. The deck was quiet. Without a word, Jay placed the homemade reader on the crate. She connected the datasphere. The screen flickered, filled with static. A whine came from the sound emitter. Her heart sank. It was failure. Then the static cleared. A face resolved on the screen. A young Stellan woman with kind eyes and Tarek's stern brow. She was smiling, speaking. Her voice was tinny through the small speaker, but clear. And the nebula's colors are incredible, Tarek. Like the paints we used as children. I think of you often. Be safe. I will see you at the next rotation. End log. The message ended. The screen went to static. The silence in the small room was absolute. Jay looked at Tarek. The soldier stood perfectly still. He was staring at the now blank screen as if he could will the image back. His stern face had completely changed. The hardness was gone. Shattered. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. His jaw was clenched tight, fighting a wave of emotion. He reached out one hand, his fingers trembling slightly, and touched the edge of the homemade reader. It was a gesture of thanks, of awe that he did not cry. He did not speak. He simply stood there, breathing slowly, letting the sound of his sister's voice fill the silent spaces inside him. After a long moment, he turned to Jay. The raw gratitude in his look was overwhelming. He nodded just once. It said more than any words could. The debt had shifted. It was no longer about armor or credits or even respect. It was about something far deeper. He had given her a piece of his broken past, and with wire and scrap, she had given a piece of it back to him. Whole that he picked up the datasphere and the clumsy reader with great care, cradling them in his hands. He looked at Jay and Min and gave another slow, deep nod. Then he left, carrying his ghost, now a little more quiet, a little more healed, out into the humming station night. The quiet after Tarek left did not last. 2 days later, a ripple of tension moved through the lower decks like a cold current. It started with whispers between merchants. Then, public service announcements began to flash on the station's info screens, written in dry, official language. Notice: the Stellan Sovereignty cruiser Steadfast Judgment will dock at Freehold Station in 72 hours for routine registry compliance and safety inspections. All mercantile licenses and species registrations must be presented for verification. Cooperation is mandatory. Min read the notice on a passing hovercart screen, his face turning to stone. He grabbed Jay's arm and pulled her inside their stall, closing the shutter. "It's a sweep," he said, his voice tight. "They say compliance. They mean undocumented. They'll be looking for calamity survivors without proper galactic ID." Jay felt a chill. Their papers were good forgeries bought at great cost years ago. But they wouldn't hold up under a deep Stellan military scan. A DNA check would reveal their Earthborn lineage instantly. "We run," Min stated. It was not a question. "We pack the core tools. We take the next freighter to the rim. Now." Jay looked around their stall. At the bench where she'd fixed the armor. At the small, glowing plant from Sumin that sat by the cash box. This was their life. Hard-won, messy, but theirs. Running meant starting over with nothing. Again. "Where?" she asked, her voice flat. "The rim is worse. And they do sweeps there too. We can't stay here." Min's fear was turning to anger. "He saw your mark, Jay. What if he reports it? What if this is his ship?" Jay hadn't considered that. The thought was like a physical blow. Would Tarek do that? She remembered the look on his face when he heard his sister's voice. She remembered his words about seeing the repair, not the crack. But he was still a Stellan soldier. Duty was everything. Before they could argue further, a shadow filled the crack under the shutter. A familiar, low voice spoke. "Mechanic." Min shot Jay a panicked look. She took a deep breath and opened the shutter just enough. Tarek stood there, once again in his full, mended armor. The gray patch was visible. His helmet was on, hiding his face. He did not wait for an invitation. He pushed the shutter up just enough to step inside, then closed it behind him, enclosing the three of them in the dim stall. "You have seen the notice," he said. "We have," Min said, stepping slightly in front of Jay. His posture was defiant, but Jay could see the fear in his shoulders. Tarek's helmet turned from Min to Jay. "Your identification will not pass their scanners. They are not bureaucrats. They are interior guard. Their purpose is to find people like you and return them to designated Earth sectors." "Why are you telling us this?" Jay asked. Her heart was pounding against her ribs. "Because a debt is owed," Tarek said simply. He reached into a compartment on his armor and pulled out a small, flat card. It was a dull metallic color, stamped with Stellan glyphs. This is an auxiliary service ID. It lists you as a technical specialist under contract to my unit. It will give you a temporary protected status. It will bypass the deep scan. He held it out to Jay. She stared at the card. It was a lifeline. It was also a cage. To take it was to tie herself to him, to the Stellan military machine. It meant admitting she was not just Jay the mechanic, but a person who needed their protection. Felt like hiding all over again. Min's eyes were wide. He looked from the card to Tarek. What do you want in return? Nothing, Tarek said, his modulated voice firm. The debt is for the voice of my sister. This is the balance. Jay did not reach for it. And after the inspection, does this contract suddenly end? Do we get relocated? The cruiser will move on in a few days. The ID will become inactive. You will return to your stall. He tilted his helmet. It is a tool for a specific job, to fix a specific problem. The analogy was deliberate. She understood it, but the problem was her existence. Taking it felt like a betrayal of every hard day she had survived to be free. It felt like painting over the gray patch on his armor to pretend it was never broken. I don't know, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Jay, Min urged, his voice strained. Take it. Tarek watched her struggle. He did not push the card closer. He just held it there, an offer on his palm. You told me you learned to fix things so you could breathe, he said, his voice quieter. This is to let you keep breathing. There is no shame in that. Only survival. The word hung in the air. Survival. It was the oldest truth she knew. Slowly, her fingers trembling slightly, she reached out and took the ID card. It was cold. It felt heavy. Thank you, she said, the words tasting strange. Tarek nodded. Stay in your stall during the inspection. If they come, show the card. Say nothing more. I will handle the rest. He turned to leave, then paused. His helmet looked at the gray patch on his own arm. A good repair is not invisible. It is strong. Remember that. He opened the shutter and was gone, leaving them in the dim light with the cold metal card and the crushing weight of a choice. Min sagged with relief. We're safe. Jay looked at the Stellan glyphs she could not read. She did not feel safe. She felt like she had just agreed to wear a different, invisible kind of armor, and she did not know if it would truly hold. The day of the inspection arrived. The atmosphere on the lower deck was tense and quiet. The usual noisy bustle was gone, replaced by the low hum of worry. Shopkeepers had their permits neatly displayed. Many beings just stayed away. Jay and Min kept their stall open. It would look more suspicious if they hid, Jay reasoned. She worked on a simple power converter, her movements automatic. The forged ID card was in her top pocket, a cold weight against her chest. Min fidgeted, unable to sit still. They came in a pair. Stellan interior guard. Their armor was sleeker than Tarek's, a polished gray-white, and it looked brand new. They moved with an efficient, emotionless purpose. One carried a data slate, the other a small scanner wand. They moved from stall to stall. A quick scan of a merchant's license, a wave of the wand, a nod, then move on. At Sumin's food stall, they paused. They scanned her permit. Then the wand beeped softly over her pots and pans. Sumin stood calmly, her hands folded. The guard with the slate asked a short question. Sumin pointed to a certificate on her wall, a cooking hygiene pass. After a moment, they moved on. Then they were at Jay's stall. The lead guard scanned their posted mercantile license. It was a good fake. The scanner gave a green blink. Min let out a tiny breath. The second guard's eyes, behind a clear visor, swept over the workbench. They landed on Jay's tool roll. One tool, a clamp with a worn wooden handle clearly of Earth design, was sticking out. The guard pointed. That implement. It is not standard. Its origin. Jay's mouth went dry. It is my father's tool. It works well. The guard did not smile. He picked up the clamp, studied it, then placed it back down. The operator. Please present your primary species identification. This was it. Jay reached into her pocket, her fingers closing around the cold Stellan ID card. Her heart hammered. She started to pull it out. But the guard with the scanner wand had already stepped closer. He was not looking at her pocket. He was looking at her. A routine biometric verification, he stated flatly. He lifted the wand. It would read her DNA from a meter away. The card would be too late. The scan would show the truth first. Panic shot through Jay. She froze. A new voice cut through the air, deep and firm, ringing with authority. The technicians here are under contract to the 9th Legion. Tarek stood at the entrance of the stall. He was in his full, mended battle armor, the gray patch a stark battle scar. He stood tall, blocking the light, every inch the veteran soldier. His presence was immense. The interior guards straightened. Their manner shifted from bored authority to sharp attention. The one with the wand lowered it slightly. Legionary, we were not informed. The contract is recent. For specialized maintenance of field equipment, Tarek said, his modulated voice leaving no room for question. He gestured to Jay. This mechanic skills are unique. The 9th Legion has need of them. Their documentation is being processed. The lead guard looked at his slate, then at Jay. Our scan shows only a basic mercantile license. No pending Legion contract is listed. The bureaucracy of the Legion is slower than the need for working gear, Tarek replied, taking a step forward. His repaired arm servos whirred softly. Would you delay a military function over a clerical delay? It was a challenge. A low-ranking inspector versus a battle-scarred frontline soldier. The guards hesitated. They looked at Jay, at her simple clothes, at the earth-made clamp on her bench. The suspicion did not leave their eyes. Jay saw it. The story was thin. They did not believe it. The wand would rise again. In that second, a hot, stubborn anger burned through her fear. She was tired. Tired of hiding, tired of flinching, tired of her history being a thing to be scanned and denied. Before the guard could move, before Min could speak, Jay acted. She deliberately pushed the sleeve of her work jacket up past her elbow. She held her left arm out, turning her wrist so the mark faced the light and the inspectors. The Earthborn sigil was clear. The globe, the broken ring, the old date etched into her skin. I am Jay, she said, her voice clear and loud in the quiet deck. Dozens of hidden eyes were watching from other stalls. I was born on Earth after the Great Calamity. I fix what is broken. She pointed with her other hand to the gray patch on Tarek's armor. I fixed that. Is my skill a crime here? Or is only my past? Silence fell. Complete, dead silence. Even the station's background hum seemed to fade. Min stared at her, horrified. Sumin watched, her hand over her mouth. The interior guards were stunned. Such a direct, public admission was unheard of. It broke all their procedures. The one with the wand looked to Tarek, expecting outrage. Tarek did not move. He gave no order. He simply stood there, a silent, armored pillar of support. His helmet was turned toward the guards, a silent pressure. The lead guard's face tightened. He could press the issue. He could arrest her now. But to do so in front of a legionary, in front of witnesses, after she had declared her value, it would be messy. It would be a report. It would be questions about why he was detaining a useful contractor. The guard looked from Jay's defiant face, to her mark, to the obvious repair on the soldier's armor. He saw a story that was more complicated than his orders. He snapped his data slate shut. The stall license is in order, he said curtly. He gave Tarek a stiff nod. Legionary, we will note the contractual situation. Without another word, the two guards turned and walked away, their steps sharp and angry, moving on to the next stall. The moment they were gone, Jay's knees felt weak. She braced herself on the workbench. Tarek turned his helmet to her. He said nothing for a long moment. Then he gave a single, slow nod of respect far deeper than any word that he had offered her a mask. She had chosen, instead, to show her scar. And it had held. The Stellan soldier returned the next day, just as the main overhead lights were shifting from day-cycle yellow to evening blue. He moved through the crowded deck with a quiet force, stepping aside without seeming to notice why. He stopped in front of Jay's stall, a solid, silent presence. Jay was already working. The great cobalt chest plate was clamped in her repair frame. She was using a fine plasma torch, its tip a brilliant white needle, to carefully cut away the blackened, bubbled edges of the gash. The smell of hot metal and vaporized nanopaste filled the air around her bench. She did not look up, but she knew he was there. "The sealant failed in 3 sublayers," she said, her voice raised slightly over the hiss of the torch. Her eyes were protected by dark lenses. "Your nanopaste is good for surface burns. This was deep. I have to go deeper to make it strong." The soldier said nothing. He watched her hands. They were steady, the movement of the torch precise and economical. She was not afraid of the armor or of him. This seemed to hold his attention. After a minute, she shut off the torch. The sudden quiet felt loud. She lifted her lenses and finally looked at him. "Your new plate will bond better. It will be a scar, but it will hold pressure. The servo," she gestured to her secondary bench where the arm assembly lay in pieces. "It is more damaged than I thought. The control nexus is cracked. I am building a new path for the signals. It will work. But the movement, it may feel different. Heavier." The helmet tilted. "Different how?" "It will not have the fine feedback for delicate tasks. It will be for strength, for holding a weapon, for shield work." She picked up a small, rough-looking component she had assembled from copper and ceramic. "This is the new driver. It is simple. Simple does not break easily." The soldier reached out with his good left hand. He did not ask, simply waited. Jay paused, then placed the component in his large palm. He turned it over, examining her soldering, the wrap of the wires, the fusion of the ceramic casing. It was clearly not Stellan manufacture. It was clearly not any standard galactic make. It was a unique solution. "This is an unusual method," his modulated voice stated. "It is an effective method," Jay replied, taking the part back. She did not explain further. He came again on the second day. This time, Jay was fitting the new composite plate. It was a dull gray, not the shiny cobalt blue. She had explained it was the only material with the right tensile strength she could get on short notice. She was using a sonic welder to fuse it to the good edges of the original armor. The tool emitted a low, bone-deep hum. Min was at the front of the stall, talking with Su-min from the food stall. Their easy laughter was a sharp contrast to the silent, watchful soldier. Jay felt the weight of his observation. He was not just checking on the work. He was studying her, her stall, her brother. She kept her head down. The final step was the seal. She used a thick, industrial-grade sealant from a Earth-made canister. The label was faded. It was a paste that cured under UV light into something harder than steel. She applied it with a broad, flat tool, smoothing it perfectly flush with the armor's surface as she finished the long, smooth stroke along the bottom edge, her sleeve. The worn cuff of her gray work jacket caught on a tiny, sharp burr of metal on the armor's inner rim. The fabric tugged, then ripped. Her hand jerked slightly, spoiling the smooth line of sealant. A flash of annoyance crossed her face. She pulled her arm back to inspect the tear, and in doing so, the sleeve rode up several inches on her forearm. And there it was. On the inside of her left wrist, just above the heel of her palm, was the mark. It was not a random pattern of ink. It was precise, intentional, etched into the skin with fine lines. A stylized globe of Earth, crossed by a fractured ring. Below it, a string of old numbers. A date. She quickly yanked her sleeve down, but it was too late. The soldier's hand moved fast. It was not aggressive, but it was firm and unavoidable. His gauntlet fingers closed gently around her wrist, holding it in place on the workbench. He used his other hand to slowly push the torn sleeve back up, revealing the mark fully. Jay stopped breathing. She did not struggle. She just went very still, her eyes fixed on the stained metal of the bench. The market noise faded into a dull roar in her ears. The soldier stared at the symbol. He knew it. Every species in the galactic community knew it, from the news report centuries ago. The Earthborn sigil. The mark of the children of the calamity. Survivors of a world that had torn itself apart. They were a people known for their stubbornness, their desperation, and their shocking ability to survive where others would perish. They were often looked down upon, seen as refugees, scavengers, relics of a tragic past. His helmet lifted from her wrist to her face. She finally met the dark, blank front of his helmet. She expected to see disgust, or pity, or cold superiority. His voice, when it came, was quieter. The modulation made it hard to read, but the edge of judgment she feared was not there. It was just fact. You are a child of the calamity. It was not a question. Jay felt the old shame, the old fear, rise like a cold wave in her chest. Then, just as quickly, it was replaced by a familiar, hard defiance. She lifted her chin. I am a mechanic, she said, her voice tight. Your armor will be ready tomorrow. For a long moment he held her wrist. He was not hurting her. He seemed to be considering the mark and her in a new light. Then he released her. He gave one more slow look at the nearly fused armor plate, at her hands now clenched into fists on the bench without another word. He turned and walked away, disappearing once more into the stream of beings. Jay slowly sank onto her work stool. Her heart was pounding. Min was at her side in an instant. Jay? What happened? What did he say? She shook her head, pulling her sleeve down firmly over the mark. She looked at the armor, at the ugly, strong gray scar she had given it. It would hold. It was not pretty, but it would function. He saw the mark. She whispered. Min's face went pale. We need to pack. Now. No, Jay said, surprising herself. She looked toward the path the soldier had taken. He didn't call station security. He just knew. She picked up her sealant tool again, her hand now steady. The armor will be ready tomorrow.